So we've got three more companies presenting this afternoon, and the first is BluGlass, and to my left is Executive Chair James Walker, and we're going to hear about the new frontier in visible lasers. Over to you.
Thanks, James. And thanks everyone for coming back after lunch. So I always know it's a little bit hard. So thanks for coming back. So a little bit about BluGlass. I'm not sure how much people. It's a bit slow. There's a lag. I can see my slides.
Working on.
All right, good. Oh well, let me talk to you about lasers anyway. So BluGlass is a semiconductor manufacturer. We're both based here in Silverwater, and we have a manufacturing facility in California. Here we go. And we are the only listed pure-play gallium nitride laser company in the world. And that's important. I'll come to why that's important. But when you think lasers and you think wavelengths, think colours. And different colours have different applications in a lot of industrial processes. Lasers are used in almost everything we do today, from 3D printing, advanced manufacturing, medical research, biotech, welding, quantum computing and quantum sensing. Lasers are used everywhere. And gallium nitride lasers, particularly these wavelengths, have some unique applications and some technical advantages over traditional IR lasers. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. So a little bit about BluGlass. Gallium nitride lasers, as I've already said, there are only 5 manufacturers in the world, and we are one of 2 based in the US. And with the current world environment, how the world has changed the last 5 months, that's really important that we have a facility in the US, and it's opened up a lot of commercial discussions. A little bit about our lasers. About 6 weeks ago, we put out an announcement in terms of world record performance and some of the technical features of our lasers. That's allowed us to open up some commercial discussions in the US, and we've won some significant contracts in the last 12 months, which I'll talk about as we go. Through the capabilities of the company and our technical advantages, we've pulled together a really good advisory board, which you can see on our website, not in this slide because I've only got 20 minutes, but world leaders in gallium nitride, world leaders in blue lasers, including a Nobel Prize winner in blue lasers. So a little bit about the commercial contracts. People who have known us for a while, we've been traditionally an R&D company, and now we are a product revenue generating company. And that has led to some great contracts, not just in product sales, but large corporates and large government organizations, including the US Department of Defense, paying us to do product development for them. So if you looked at our P&L today, you will see a small amount of product revenue. Revenue from product sales is growing, with most of our revenue actually coming from product development agreements. So people asking us to develop products that they need for their applications. And here's an example of some of these that we've won in the last 12 months. And I've got some slides on more of these as we go on, including this one. This agreement with the US Department of Defense through the ME Commons program was a significant breakthrough for BluGlass. This effectively was the Department of Defense through the US CHIPS Act was given $2 billion over a 5-year program. That then set up some commercial fabs, so some commercial partnerships, of which they're called hubs, and we were in one of those hubs. And this is the hub that we're in. This hub has been allocated $63 million over the first 2 years, over a 5-year program, of which we have won nearly $5.5 million worth of contract revenue. Really significant for us in terms of revenue for BluGlass. But more importantly, we now are an approved manufacturer for the US Department of Defense, which is really important. And that has opened up a whole lot of commercial discussions because it's given us credibility in the US market, because we can now make lasers and work with the right people to develop the lasers that they need in country. This has been a breakthrough contract for us, and we're only 2 years into a 5-year agreement. A question I get asked all the time is, well, what's the revenue for the next 3 years? Unfortunately, we're not allowed to talk about that. That's an annual allocation from the Department of Defense, but we've got another 3 years to go on this program. So we will be announcing more of those as each year as the annual allocation comes out. So where do we play? So lasers can be used in almost everything, as I've already said. We particularly focus on defense, quantum sensing, quantum computing, and a little bit in the health space. But really, when we look at our customers and our commercial discussions, it's defense, communications, and quantum computing and quantum sensing. And No surprises, big markets growing fast, and gallium lasers have a big part to play in that. So this is where we have particularly strong applications. So a lot of our discussions are in space communications, underwater communications, quantum computing and quantum sensing. And of course, quantum sensing, quantum computing, everyone feels like it's a long way away, but quantum sensing exists today. It's used in a lot of applications, including the building of a replacement for GPS navigation. If you read over the last year or so, there's been lots of instances where commercial airlines have been disrupted because GPS navigation has been disrupted. And they're building new ways to do navigation, and quantum sensing will play a role in that, and lasers will be a key part of that work. I won't spend a lot of time on this because I don't have a lot of time, but big markets growing fast. Lasers are fundamental to where quantum computing and quantum sensing work, because each of these wavelengths are required to turn on each of these atoms at different spaces. So you need different wavelengths. And the beauty of BluGlass is in GaN that we work in all this space. And because of our technical advantages, we can actually be very fine-tuned on the actual wavelength that they need to turn on these atoms. And that was one of the key reasons why we got into lasers in the first place, is the two big gorillas in the room, the two big competitors that we work with are Osram and Nuclear, two big lighting companies, one out of Japan, one out of Germany. And the customers were telling us when we were researching this market that from the Osram Nuclear, they weren't getting the flexibility on wavelength, and they weren't getting the flexibility on how those lasers were packaged, how you would buy them, how they were integrated into what you needed. So we've deliberately positioned BluGlass as the nimble third supplier, and that's what's getting us these conversations. Here are some of the partners we're either talking to or working with or who play in this space. And as I said, we do a lot of work in the industrial, quantum computing and defense, a little bit of work in the display and biotech, but a lot of our conversations are in those three markets. And a great example is Coherent. Coherent is one of the largest laser companies in the world, but they cannot produce GaN laser diodes. And hence they're part of our consortium at ME Commons, but we are the only GaN laser diode supplier in that cohort. So as an example of what I talked about earlier, where our product revenue is small but growing, and a lot of our revenue is coming from product development agreements. This is reflected in this slide. So we've been able to quantify the discussions we've got on the product development side only. So these are multi-year contracts. People are paying us to develop particular lasers that they need. A lot of these 26 programs are based in the US, no surprises, because we are, as I said, we're one of a handful of manufacturers in the world and only two in the US. So we've got a lot of discussions going on with companies and other authorities about developing products they want. And we feel pretty comfortable about this pipeline of where we are. And no surprises, like all pipelines, there are companies at the beginning of the funnel, companies at the end of the funnel, and many in between. And we're in the process, we've got companies in all stages, including some at later stage contract negotiation. What's really good about these product development agreements are, particularly with corporates, is that when we finalize one of the agreement, we're also talking about a product supply agreement, i.e. if we're going to pay you this money to develop this product, we then want to know it's available for the next 10, 15, 20 years. So we want to start talking to you about volumes. That has led to some very slow negotiations, I've got to say, and anyone who's followed the stock would understand that we haven't announced as many as we probably would like at this stage, but we are having product development and product supply agreements and those type of conversations, and they take time, particularly with some of the larger companies we're dealing with. So in summary, BluGlass, I think, has been in the best position technically it's ever been in terms of the announcement about 6 weeks ago with world record performance in some of our lasers. Commercially, last financial year, our best year ever in terms of revenue. 6 months for this year and ongoing for the rest of this financial year, we feel very comfortable about the revenue profile. And that's backed up by particularly the Department of Defence contract, which I've already spent a lot of time talking about. And then going forward, based on these discussions in our pipeline, we actually feel very comfortable about where the revenue is going and where it's going to be in 12 months and 18 months' time. So much so that the current, we did a placement last week for anyone who saw that. It's now backed up by an SPP. So if you're a shareholder in BluGlass, you can participate in the SPP. That includes a trigger event on the option for when we announce one of these major contracts within the next 12 months. So feeling very confident about where we are in terms of revenue today, revenue going forward. Anyone who looks at our financials will see that, today we are not cash flow positive, but the funding arrangement we did last week with the placement and the SPP will make sure that we get very close to being sustainable going forward. And that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you, James. Any questions for James from the floor? Mark?
Thanks, James. So that last slide. So from where you are now in terms of contracted revenues to sort of the opportunity that was there as well, I think, in terms of was 80 to 100 mil in terms of opportunity potentially. With your current facilities, your fab in the US, how much of that can you accommodate, and what would you need to sort of expand? How much expansion would you need to get to that to fulfill all that?
Yeah, so good question. So we bought a fab in California about 2.5 years ago. So this was a laser diode fab, making not GaN lasers, but traditional IR lasers. The company was moving to a larger facility. We bought that facility. It was a great deal, I've got to say. We bought it for $2.5 million, which is unheard of for a laser diode fab. Took over the lease, hired the staff that had been working on that equipment for a long time, and effectively bought the equipment. So with that facility and the 5 reactors we have out at Silverwater, at full capacity, we can make about $170 million a year worth of product. Now, we're not going to be able to turn that on tomorrow. We'll need to refresh some of that CapEx, but we have the capability in the space to get to about $170 million worth of revenue.
Just a couple from me. You've got some impressive partnerships here, James.
Yep.
But maybe could you just dig into a couple? So the Microelectronics Commons, I understand that's sort of an enabling partnership for you on a lot of levels. So could you just tell us a bit more about how that came about, what it is?
So that's a really important, as I said earlier, that's a really important agreement for us in the fact that, and where it originally came about was about 3 years ago with the move to laser diodes. We brought in a professional CEO from the US whose entire working career had been in laser diodes, and Jim Haddon is his name. Jim, entire life, including working at some of these companies and some of the other companies I talked about earlier, has been building lasers for all of his career, and he's slightly older than me. So that's a long time. Through his network, one, we found the fab in California, but two, it was his network with the universities in particular that got us into the ME Commons program. And as I said, we are the only gallium nitride laser company across the whole cohort, across all 8 hubs. So super important. And then through that, that's opened up discussions, particularly with defence primes, about how they can access our technology. So yes, it was great money for BluGlass, $5.5 million over the last 2 years, but really it was the credibility of being in this hub, working with the people that are in this hub and the universities, and then the advisory board we've got, that then allowed us to have these discussions with really, good defence primes that we wouldn't normally get access to. So we've got those. We've got great relationships with the universities, and then we've got other discussions going on with other American companies, because I can't overemphasize how important it is to be a manufacturer in the US right now. Super important for us, and that's opened up, once again, a lot of conversations, which means for the first time we've been able to really quantify that pipeline, because we can now identify who those people are.
Okay, and maybe just any... Yep, we've got a couple. Michael?
Thanks, James. Can you talk a little bit about the material that goes into your processes? You mentioned gallium, for example. I just want to a couple of words on the Chinese situation.
Yeah. So our suppliers. So yes, gallium is definitely a hot topic at the moment for sure. But our supply. So first of all, we've got 2 years worth of supply in our facility. So we've built up a reserve. So we've got that, and then we buy a lot of our gallium from US and Japan, where our suppliers, of course, at the moment, we're feeling very comfortable that we can continue to get supply from them. So we don't see any short-term or medium-term issues in terms of our capacity and what we need. Going forward, who knows? But at the moment, we feel pretty comfortable about where we are.
Thank you for your presentation. Osram and Lumi are very big players in this space. They've got deep pockets, big R&D budgets. How is your technology protected?
So we have lots of patents, not surprisingly. So one thing I didn't touch on this presentation, BluGlass's original technology was in a semiconductor manufacturing process. It's called RPCVD. It replaces MOCVD. But effectively, we've got a lot of patents in that manufacturing process. And then we've got over 15 years of work in gallium nitride itself. So with the patent families, which is about 58 patents around the world, and our history in gallium, that's why there aren't many gallium manufacturers, because it's really quite difficult working with gallium. And then our patents are fundamentally the baseline of our protection. And then actually being a manufacturer is the other part. And then clearly being in the US helps a lot with the protection of that, particularly compared to some of those guys.
Any other questions, Mark?
Just hop back on the mic there just so they
can hear you. Yep.
Yeah, just wondering on the three segments you mentioned that you're sort of most active in. It's a two-part question, actually. Which one of those is sort of the fastest growing or the biggest opportunity?
Yep.
And the other is, which one of those is sort of the easiest, as in the sector that needs your product the most, as in easiest to move forward and to get to commercial deals?
Yeah, so I've got to say we really like the quantum computing, quantum sensing place. That's obviously fast growing. You know, they need lasers to work. So we are having discussions. So the advantage of being in quantum is they can move quicker because they're building their products right now and we can be built into those discussions. Disadvantage is they're much smaller. And hence, you know, we're not going to lock in a big long-term product supply agreement next year. But over time that will build up. So I feel very comfortable. We've got these early fast-growing companies that we're supplying product to and product development agreements, paying less today, but over the long term will be the future. And then we've got on the defence side these much longer discussions, which are, you know, can be painful, but are much bigger contracts. So I think we've got the benefit of working with big companies that can pay us larger amounts but take longer to land, and then smaller product revenues coming through quicker, which over time I think will be the main driver of our business will be in the quantum computing, quantum sensing space. It's just fundamental. Those lasers and those wavelengths are just fundamental to quantum computing, quantum sensing. Cool.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, James. Appreciate it.
Thank you.